Hey guys, there's this show about a youth who can wish for things that make his life less terrible. It's called Somewhat Strange Guardians, and it stars a boy named Tames as he navigates throughout a world filled with weirdos and useless idiots. Much like The Thompsons, it started off as low-quality shorts on some other program, but then it got its own show later on, which had its first episode on the same day as Conqueror Bob Way. And even though I like that one more, it was actually pretty lit too, until it wasn't. Yeah, like it used to be one of the History Channel's most popular shows, but either the writers started abusing substances, or the channel just took a piss all over it, but either way something went wrong. Anyway, let's go over the people in the show. So the main character is Tames, and he has fairies that do whatever he tells them to. I know you're wondering why I'm just calling them fairies and not some other made up name, but there aren't that many names to call them, and all the other names are taken by other characters in the show, so whatever. But there are limitations to the fairies' powers, because there's like some 5-mile long book full of things you can't do, because I guess they can't let the boy be too much of a psychopath. The male fairy is worthless, but the female fairy is whatever. They both used to be off one at the early stages of the show, but then they made the female character smarter, because characterization is a thing. Tames has to keep their existence a secret, or else you'll lose them forever. The reason they're in Tames' life is because his parents can't be asked to actually raise their son. So the father's as worthless as the male fairy. I really can't tell who's worse, but he used to be tolerable, so I'll give him a pass. And the mother just exists. Not only can they not do their job as parents, but they also go above and beyond to ensure their son doesn't turn out right. They hire a babysitter to torture Tames, because I guess nobody else is signing up for that. As she was bullying him so hard, the universe had to give him 2 wish answers to stop him from wanting to jump. Then there's Tames' friends, Broke Boy and Smart Boy. Broke Boy lives in a trailer with his broke boy dad, and Smart Boy is also a rich boy, and of course they made him a Negro, because they have to show that we can overcome stereotypes for all the young ones out there. There's also 2 other allies, but they're just backup humans, and belong to an even lower caste than Tames and his main friends. They all get harassed by the babysitter, but not as much as Tames, so they get nothing. Then there's the babysitter's sister, who has a hard-on for Tames. She's just annoying to listen to, so we don't get to spend much time on her. But Tames himself has a hard-on for a girl who's like twice his size, despite being in the same grade. Depending on the episode, she's either a regular person or a hoe, but in general she's an op, so she gets no props. She has a friend who's far lamer than her, and they both are accompanied by 2 guys that are rich and don't actually do anything, besides making Tames feel inferior. In the fairy dimension, the leader's some buff Arnold Schwarzenegger nigga, who's like the same height as regular people. He doesn't have wings, but flies with a machine. Growing up, I legitimately could not tell if he was supposed to be a Negro or not, and I still can't, but to keep it safe, we'll just assume he's not. Also, there's a male fairy's mom, who has no redeeming qualities. There's a love guy, the joke guy, the tooth woman, who's also actually human sized, just like the leader. They even got married later on or something, but that's kind of irrelevant. Also, there's a doctor, even though you would think they could just wish themselves back to health. And there's some guy that the leader repeatedly bullies. The fairies have businessmen ops that also grant wishes, but do them in a professional way, so that puts them in their feelings. Also, there's a djinn, whose purpose in life is to misconstrue whatever wish he hears, to maximize the suffering of the wisher. Back to the human world, there's a Darth Vader ripoff that Tames wished for in one episode, and he keeps coming back for some reason. Then there's a superhero with a large jaw that Tames helps from time to time. There's a grown man who thinks he's a hero because he's suffering from dementia, and there's another hero who's lame and barely even deserves to be mentioned. The guys who made this show are so off the perks, they really tried to give him his own series, but that didn't work out, now did it. Then there's a serial killer dentist who enjoys watching people suffer, and his even less likable son. Then there's a mayor who's like 3 feet and spends all his day with the goats. And the news guy's also like 3 feet, but he spends his day on camera, so he looks physically imposing, but people know the truth, so that's an L for him. Then there's a rich guy in the vicinity who basically owns the city and has a hat that reaches the clouds. Then there's a principal at Tames' school who can't do her job, so she shouldn't have her position. And there's some drama teacher that is equally unqualified to be judging other people's performances. And finally, there's Tames' dad's op, who's infinitely better than him in every way, so Tames' dad has to try his hardest to get any W he can over him. All the characters I haven't mentioned yet will either be explained in greater detail when I go over the episodes they appear in, or I won't go over them at all, because either I forgot, or they don't matter to anything. The first episode we'll be going over is that first one that aired, when it got its own show. It starts out with the fairies jumping to wake Tames up for his uneventful life. Then he gets to school and gets helped by his bully, who's a grown man, despite being in elementary school. And to make matters worse, his niggas are right there and do nothing about it. Then he gets tossed around by a football team, and when he gets home to feel right again, his parents just do the dash on him, leaving with the op as babysitter. So Tames wishes he could be a grown man so that he can return the favor to everyone that did him wrong, but the fairies make him a bum of all things, and also it turns out he can't wish for anything because he's no longer a fetus. So adult Tames goes on an L-taking spree across town until he decides to go to a restaurant and live life there, but then he comes across a bill that he's supposed to pay, but he's lacking the funds, so he's forced to do manual labor instead. Then he gets benched from his own house by the babysitter, so he has to go somewhere else. Then the babysitter finds out that Tames is gone, so she makes up a disguise for him that his brain-dead parents fall for. Now Tames is so down bad, he's sleeping on benches, but then he wakes up seeing his friends getting held by the bully, so he tries to do something about it, but then 12 gets involved, so he has to retreat. Meanwhile, the babysitter is going around town looking for him. Also, it turns out that now the fairies have to go to someone else, because Tames is no longer a fetus. So Tames tries whatever he can to be a youth again, but it doesn't work out, so he gets in his feelings, which makes him a youth again, and then he shows up to the babysitter, so it looks like the request is over. Then the episode ends with Tames making the bully put himself in a stretcher. This episode is pretty chill for a first one. In the next one, Tames wishes for a video game that isn't lame, but of course his bum-ass classmates get there first and finesse the equipment, while Tames' back was turned. So now Tames has to go in and and bail her out. While this is happening, Thames' fairies have to distract the babysitter with rip-off shows. Eventually, she gets wise to the antics, which is a problem, because if there's too much electricity, then all the guys in the game will end up being packs. But it's okay, because the male fairy had a backup plan, and they managed to finish the game and go back to their real lives. And then Thames watches his babysitter get in the game, and presumably not come out. And the next episode, it starts out with the boys watching that lame-ass character we went over like a minute ago, but he's looking lit, so Thames' friends trying to live like him. To make their dreams come true, Thames' fairies brought a real alien with them, but it turns out he's from a planet that's always tweaking, so his plans are on the way to swoop him and turn the world into a thing of the past. But since his people are such weirdos, it turns out he's fallen in love with the babysitter, and now he wants to murk Thames' friends to prove himself for her. So Thames goes to his parents' spaceship and does a very simple task that they think are actually doing something. After exposing the pussy in all of them, Thames makes them come to Earth to tell their son that he can't hang, which happened, so that's how the story ends. The next episode we'll be going over establishes a very important character. It starts out with Thames in class, and it looks like his teacher is one of those limbs has nothing better to do than to waste kids' times and fail them, so you know a lot of kids are considered to end it all. But then Thames has a project ready, and it's an actual dinosaur from the past, so the teacher believes that was the work of fairies, and tries to schedule a meeting with Thames' parents so they can get him caught up. So Thames tells his friends to get his project back, and has his fairies pose as his parents so he can keep all his businesses in order. See, the teacher is a psycho that wants to help people on a global basis, and fairies are his best shots, so he tries to get Thames' friends to sell out against him, which they do. Then he meets with the fairy parents, and they continue to act up, but also it turns out that Thames' friends didn't sell him out, and he's able to change his project into something believable in front of the principal. So it looks like the teacher's plot has been foiled. In some other episode, Thames tries to go to the park, but he and his family keep taking L's left and right, as do everyone else, because it turns out that nigga fairies exist just to make life worse for real people, and they come out every other minute just to be ops. When Thames goes to the fairy realm to show them what time it is, he ends up freeing all of them, and they're led by a nega version of the male fairy who actually has a brain cell. Then they run through Earth and hoe everything in sight, almost any civilization, until Thames does the most in order to get them back to their natural habitats. And the next episode we'll be going over, Thames meets a rich kid who makes his mission to make Thames' life as not worth it as possible. Like, he even starts invading his imagination, yet Thames still thinks nothing of it. When he goes to his house to gather intelligence, he finds out that he actually has a fairy of his own that's like the female fairy's ex or something. The rich kid also learns that Thames has fairies and challenges him to a duel so that he can make him lose his fairies. After 2 rounds, he reveals that he's doing the most because his parents don't love him, but it's like, nigga, you have the funds, go cop some food or something, stop worrying about what the next man has. But the male fairy is able to sabotage the rich guy's fairy enough to ensure that Thames takes a W, but I guess Thames feels bad, so he tries to make things a little better for his op while he's going through it. And the next episode we'll be going over, it starts out with a bunch of students having a time on the playground until they realize what day it is and begin to tweak, because they know the teacher's going to be doing too much. When they get to the classroom, he starts doing everyone dirty, so Thames takes it upon himself to find out why his teacher's bugging so hard. So he goes back in time and finds that his teacher's been bumming around over fairies his entire adult life, and eventually reaches his childhood, where it's not he used to have fairies of his own, and was an actually productive member of society. So Thames tries to fix whatever went wrong, but it doesn't work out, because the male fairy is bent on making it clear that he doesn't deserve to live, and ends up getting his fairies exposed, which completely fucks over the teacher, because now he has to lose them. But he leaves a note for himself to remember what he once had, so it looks like he's just gonna be a problem permanently. In the last regular episode we'll be going over, Tim's trying to play some game with his parents, but they'd rather watch something big than spend time with their son, so he wishes for the return of his imaginary friend, who basically blows him off and acts more chill than him, so the parents give him more attention. Then things get worse when he gets to school, and he owes Thames in front of his friends, but they safe handed over the imaginary one. It goes as far as the girls Thames has a hard on for, acknowledging his existence just to get closer to the imaginary friend. So when Thames goes to confront the imaginary friend for everyone running his tip, he gets mad at Thames for not knowing his place, and it turns out he can control the fairies too, so they have to go in Thames' mind, where he gets the fairies tied up and almost puts Thames on a shirt because he stopped playing with him. But then Thames is able to get the imaginary friend out of the way because he's no longer an embryo, but it looks like the imaginary friend found a way to get back, so well. Now it's time to go over one of the classic TV movies the show had. So it starts out in the future, where everything was trash, but Thames' friends are trying to go back in time to fix everything, but then they get stopped by some op, and it's one of the babysitter's ruler of everything for some reason. Then in the present, the babysitter's getting wet, thinking about how she's gonna make Thames want to jump, but while Thames is watching a Dragon's Balls ripoff, it inspires him to do the most and ruin his parents' day. They send him to home imprisonment with the babysitter, so he has his fairies wish him a remote that lets him go on TV shows. Meanwhile, the babysitter is doing way too much outside, so that she can see that Thames did it, like the weirdo she is. And the male fairy is covering for Thames, so when she gets there, she does him dirty. Also, that op from the future is in the background doing something. While going through TV shows, Thames was that he might not keep his fairies forever. Then they explain to him at his crib that when he gets too old, he'll lose them because they're only for youths, so this news has him hurt. Then his parents show back up and gun his ass over what the babysitter did because they think he's responsible. Then the babysitter hosts him yet again and takes his remote with her, so he decides to piss off from his crib for eternity and get a new remote to go through the TV with. Also, the babysitter uses her remote to go inside the TV and win money, so now she has a plan to take over the world. While Thames is going through channels, the op from the beginning of the movie's on his ass, and they keep having to dodge him. Meanwhile, Thames' friend trying to talk to his friends to figure out if the babysitter's an op too, but she has eyes all over them, and they're too pussy to speak out against her. Eventually, the op chasing Thames reveals himself to be Thames from the future, and he's actually a double agent, went back in time to stop the babysitter, so that's cool. So Thames' parents meet up with the babysitter's parents, but they also bow down to their own daughter, so they're a waste of time. So now that Thames and future Thames are on the same page, they get on the babysitter's ass and start chasing her throughout TV shows. After that, Tim's parents meet up with the babysitter's sister, and she shows them proof that the babysitter's an op, so now they know the obvious. Eventually, the babysitter puts future Tims on the news, so Tims and the babysitter catch a fade that ends with Tim thinking himself too old for the remote to work for either of them, and then having himself get turned to a youth again. After his W, Tims goes through channels trying to go home, while his parents use the rich guy's studio to broadcast a message to him. Then they all got reunited, and his parents put the babysitter out on the streets, but Tim decides to reverse everything that happened because he figures they has to take his W's with his L's. Then he buries some box in his yard that gets dug up again by his offspring decades later, but it turns out he can't remember what his own parents put him through, because now he just leaves his kids get abused by a robot version of the babysitter. Now the show is pretty lit until it fell off horribly. Some people think it stopped being good when the baby showed up, but honestly, it was already ass the season before it. The show kept going on and adding pointless characters and not using the ones it already had, but then in the last season, it became unwatchable when they had him share his affairs with some rando girl and change the animation up, so now it's cancelled and in the garbage of history. Hopefully, this is a lesson to anybody trying to make a show, cap it off at a certain time, because the show had a disgraceful exit. Okay guys, make sure that when you subscribe you hit the notification button, because that lets you know whenever I make a new video, and as always, thanks for watching.